Hello, and welcome to The Forgotten King, an audio drama presented by Story Games. Let's tell a story.
Raka's Woods was full of trees that Thario used to know like friends. The bristlebarks and poplars, the skinny elms, and mudwoods that grew wide like a fungus more than a tree. Now, though, these friends were different. The skin of their barks, the arms of their branches, the faces formed in their trunks by knots and holes didn't seem so familiar to Thario as he walked between them. They looked hollow, like they had been crying from all the rain the night before. It was a strange storm. Magical rain, likely, which tended to be warm. Some drops were fat and heavy. Others were just the beginning of drops, as if the rain couldn't decide what it wanted to be. It certainly wasn't naturally formed. The riders likely conjured it. And as it soaked through Thario's rough-spun tunic the next morning while he walked in the direction of home, it was a wet reminder that everything had changed. Both of his parents were dead. And now, memories were all he had of them. Remembering them was the only way he could see their faces. Oh, what a horrible thought, he shuddered, pressing on and jumping over a creek. He had decided to head home once the rain had stopped. The riders seemed to come with the rain. It seemed a decent guess that they would leave with it as well. As he approached the tree line of the forest he had grown up in, his heart felt a twinge of pain as he made eyes on his family farm. It was such a simple place. A home made of stone and dirt and wood, with flowers and windows and beds to make it comfortable. Its heart was the fireplace. Its lungs were the breaths that Thario, his mother and father took between its walls. And somehow, deep inside Thario's chest, he knew that it would never be the same. That it had died last night. His feet dragged him closer to the corpse that was his home. He couldn't decide if he was hoping to find his father's body, or if it would be better to have had the storm demons whisk it away on their black steeds of death. His father was fiercely loyal to the Arryns. Perhaps the riders were turned men who wanted vengeance from the war? But from what his father had described of the turned, they didn't seem anything like the men he saw last night. Were they men? They didn't have faces. They might not have been humans at all. More like wraiths of Manon, born from nightmares who whispered death with their black iron swords. Thario concluded as he jumped the wooden fence at the back of their plot. A few of his mother's books had been about necromancy, the darker arts of the magic in Eldaron, typically wielded by disciples of Manon. Perhaps these men were conjured by someone with those powers? It was his best guess at the moment, though his attention was quickly shifting elsewhere. His mother's grave was now in sight, just a rock throw away, buried under the olive tree they used to harvest for oil. Though she laid to rest in the dirt, he could see her swimming in Mira, her blonde hair glowing in the cool blue water of Shire's love. He took a moment to rest his hand on the mound formed from her body and kiss the praying hands struck into the white stone marking the grave. When he opened the door to the empty home, the sun lit it in a way that made his heart ache. A soft golden yellow that bathed the walls with warmth. Thario knew they should feel warm to him. He wanted them to. But the pain he felt in his blood, the damp clothes, and the grief he felt in his heart could not be warmed by the sun rising above the small mountains in the east. He had come for just a few things: provisions for the road, his favourite couple of books, and a gold medallion his father had given him when he turned 10 and 5. Boys became men in Eldaron at that age. At least, that's what his father told him when he shoved the insignia of valor into his arms as a gift. It was wrapped in cowhide and tied with yarn. It was the single possession Thario loved most in the world. Not just because he couldn't pick a single favourite book to treasure most, but also because it meant his father was a man of honour, esteem and legacy. The medallion was a symbol of that. And before he set off to parts unknown, to fill out his father's wishes, he knew he couldn't take a step in any direction without that medallion. Since the day he got it, he knew he'd hold on to it for years and years, until he could give it to his own son one day. It took only moments to pack his belongings and let his eyes gaze one last time on the bones that had been his childhood. The library, the table and chairs, the fireplace and the mantel. They formed the very core of what his world had been since he was born. When he closed the door and finally had his back to his home, he couldn't help but find the horizon, calling to him from a distance. It didn't have a voice on it, not exactly, but something pulled him towards the point where the land met the sky. It would be a day's hike to Arrenhall, 10 leagues away from his family farm. He knew the road would be long. And though he was glad he had a few books to keep him company on this first part of his adventure, he was rather certain the plot of his own life was beginning to be much more intriguing than the ones he had read about before. It was a deep brown lager, with a thick froth on top and notes of nuts and honey on the finish. It was Quintus's favourite brew at the Battered Shield, the tavern he would most commonly visit on his nights among the people. Arrenhall was a neighbourhood city built into the trees. Cobblestone and dirt pathways guided pedestrians between homes. Taverns and merchants set up the sales of their goods in and among the forest. The prince preferred the merchants' quarter. It felt like everyone knew each other and cared about the well-being of the community over the needs of themselves. It was a powerful feeling that lived in the alleys and rooftops, the small silence between conversations, and the space behind people's eyes. All were welcome. None were shunned. Life wasn't taken too seriously, especially at night. When the sales and the trades of the day were logged, the lanterns in the street posts were lit, and the doors to the many taverns and pubs along the streets were left open on purpose, as if to say, "Come in, have a pint, and tell us a tale of your adventures in the world." The Battered Shield was no exception. It was always full, but never too full. This was by design, as the owner, a broad-shouldered woman named Rethel, who was known to outdrink any man in the city, kept tabs on capacity and would turn people away if the air got too stuffy inside. Quintus was well known at the small drinkery, but no one cared that he was part of the royal family. And though his father insisted a member of the king's circle accompany him, he never feared a confrontation at the inn. Tonight, his father's appointed guard was Sir Cian, a dark-skinned, handsome knight who wore his plated armour like it was his own flesh and bone, carved and chiselled with an emblem of fire pounded into the chest plate and the blue and red colours of House Arran folding the cape down his back. Truth be told, Sir Cian was his father's best blade, but it was not who Quintus preferred out of the 7 men in his father's king's circle. The man that Quintus trusted more than any other was a man named Shiro, a killer with a face as calm as a bonsai tree. Shiro had pledged his katana and life to Arrenhall and to Quintus. He was one out of 100 men that had been sent from Southgate to fight in the Great War. Shiro was the only man who lived out of those 100, and he never said a word. And he always listened. Quintus was on his 2nd pint as Shiro listened from his flank. Sir Cian was just starting his 5th mug, and Quintus's closest friend in the world, Uffman, was still tending to his 1st mug full. "They're men on horseback, cloaked riders that come in the rain, at night," a local named Hallan rumoured as he leaned into Quintus. "Where did you see them?" Quintus followed up. "I've not laid eyes on them, my prince. I didn't mean to suggest I did either. I only share what I heard from a customer." "Where did your customer live?"
Quintus asked, focused on every word. Oh, didn't ask. Didn't think to, if I'm being honest. I was hoping it was far away. All the way on the Fallen Coast if I'd had it my way. I hope they never come as far as Harrenhal. Quintus eyed the room as he drank his ale. How many are there? Uffman chimed in. At least 10 and 2, maybe more. Hallen gave up one more detail, clearly enjoying the spread of gossip. There were 7. Another voice came from behind Hallen. It belonged to a young man with a thin frame who looked like he'd recently lived a few days that stretched like months. You've seen them? Quintus brought his attention past Hallen to the stranger, who looked a similar age to his own. Tall, adequately built. Perhaps he was a farmhand in the stables. I have. The traveller left a coin on the bar for his brew. Put it on my ledger, would you? Quintus shouted to the barmaiden as she reached for the coin. Very well. She slid the coin back to its sender and turned to make a mark on the parchment she used to keep record of Quintus's buys. Would you mind telling me all you know? Quintus finished and looked hard at Hallen, strongly suggesting he give the stranger his seat. Hallen popped his eyebrows and rose with a big swing of his brew. I should be headed off anyway, early start tomorrow, and I have to empty my bowels before I lay down or I won't sleep. Circean suddenly leapt forward and grabbed Hallen by the shoulders. No one needed to know any of that, Hallen. Sorry, Circean, sorry. Or when I drink too much, I talk too much. Well met, Hallen. Quintus slapped him on the shoulder. Night. Hallen sauntered off. May I ask your name? Quintus said to the thin frame as he sat down. Thario, if it pleases you, sir. Thario sniffed back, some cold lingering in his nose. He still felt the chill of the nights in the woods he'd had to endure since he ran from his father. Take him. Why had he run? He should have ignored his father and stayed to fight by his side. Maybe the two of them could have fought their way through the thieves. But no, there were too many of them, and he was quite certain they weren't men at all. Storm demons, perhaps? Disciples of Manon? Where are you from? Quintus continued. The farmlands, eastern side, at the base of the small mountains. Near the woods or away from them? My father's stead backed up to Racker's woods. I've been to the same farm as a boy. My siblings and I went as kids to pick pumpkins during Hexman. I'd never seen pumpkins that big, nor have I since. I remember that day, my prince. My father was honoured to have you and your family come to our plot. And where is your father? Did he travel with you to Harrenhal? I'm afraid not. Shire willing he lives, but I've little hope for that. Tell me everything that happened that night. Everything. They came to the farm. My father heard them coming from a way off. He always had a sense for danger. Where it was, and what it was. Thario took a long pull of his ale before he continued. There were 7 of them. And they had one voice. Spoken like a whisper made of thunder, and the voice was not their own. Thario was certain he sounded insane, but he felt relieved when Quintus didn't balk. In fact, the handsome prince leaned in. It sounds dreadful, Quintus empathized. It was, my king, and the words I heard, you need to hear them too. What did they say? Quintus inquired, leaning in. He asked where the king was. You're certain? I am. Did they say my father's name? No. And that was all you heard him say? Had I more skill with a blade and a pocketful more of courage, I may have stayed to listen, but my father told me to run to the woods and not look back. So I did. Quintus reached a hand out to Thario's shoulder. What your father told you was right, and you were right to listen. I'm sorry for your loss. He sounds like a brave man. Thario clearly hadn't let that harsh reality sink in yet. I don't know if he brought down any of them. Was a great swordsman, my father, actually, so maybe he wasn't ready to face it just yet. Instead, he pivoted. My father fought with your father in the first turning. He spoke fondly of the Arryns, always. He looked for relief from the conversation at the bottom of his mug. Thario, hear me now. I'll dispatch a search party to find your father's remains. and he will have a proper burial, honoured by our citizens for standing ground against enemies of Arran.
It's kind of you, sir. More than we deserve, but I cannot accept. I knew it to be true that his wish was to be laid out next to my late mother, his wife, so that they might rest together under the olive tree on the east edge of our property, where she is also buried. Thario couldn't help be warmed by the dream.
I hope I have the same end as your father, Farmer Thario, fighting with honour, dying with a sword in my hand, and ultimately resting next to the woman I love. I will instruct the search party accordingly. They will carry out his final request.
I'm in your debt, my prince. Truly.
Think nothing of it, though I wonder what is to become of you. Do you wish to return to the farm?
I'm not yet decided. I'd be all alone there, and I don't relish the idea of living day to day just a few paces from where my parents eternally rest. Then again, it is my home, and I have no other to go to.
Quintus sat up and leaned forward. How's this then? Our castle is home to a few young stewards, orphans like yourself. You seem a decent fellow. Suffered more than any should. Perhaps we can find a use for you in the castle.
In your castle? In Arran?
Thario's ears perked up like a hound.
The very same.
No, so I have some idea of how to persuade the king to best use you. How old are you, Master Thario?
10 and 6, my prince.
Ah, that's ripe as an apple then. Kyla will fawn all over you and ultimately spend less time bothering me.
You have honoured me enough tonight, my lord. I'm not sure how to accept a second honour, such as you've offered,
Thario said meekly. It's quite simple, really. Quintus tapped his quarter-full mug against Thario's empty one and downed the rest of the lager. You lift up your chin, take a deep breath and say, "I accept Prince Quintus Arran, and promise not to fall in love with your sister right away," or something. Thario couldn't help but marvel at the bright smile on the prince's face. It made his own cheeks rise. That felt good. Especially because he was recently convinced he'd never smile again.
I accept your terms as they are and promise to spend my life serving House Arran as payment for the kindness you've shown me.
I don't know about all that last part. Maybe we'll talk to my father about that. For now, consider yourself a friend of mine and a tenant of the castle.
I will, my lord, and thank you, my lord.
Thario bowed. And let's make that the last time you call me lord. Take me. Makes me sound like a 50-year-old noble past his prime and on his way to death. Quintus will do just fine, unless we're at a ceremony or in battle, and I hope to keep you clear of either of those for as long as I can. Quintus pushed his mug towards the barmaiden and gestured with his finger for another round. The way I see it, we only have one thing left to do.
And what's that, my lord? Quintus?
We use the coin of the crown to drink to your father and honour him till we can't stand up.
Thario took a deep breath, then humbly admitted, I'm a wallowing old crone the morning after I've had too much to drink.
It's no matter at all. I'll have Zorion the seer concoct you a potion of tonic and milled herbs that will wash away the illness like a stream in the river.
Such a thing exists?
It sure does, my young friend. Quintus slapped him on the shoulder as he grabbed 2 new mugs of lager from the barmaiden. I'm rather certain there are many new discoveries awaiting for you in the castle. And most of them are far more exciting than a morning after potion.
The Forgotten King was created and written by Michael Stagliano. Story by Michaela Oberhofer, El Silito, Matthew Pajad, Maisie Foat, Matthew O'Connell, and Stephen Stagliano. Voice narration by Kitty Liddon. Sound design and scoring by Chris Kirk. Produced by Greg Wood and Emil Hanton.